In the third sector, 3 challenges are considered especially difficult to overcome. The dedicated nonprofit leaders who battle these issues with human resources, funding, and effectiveness are members of an elite squad known as executive directors. These are their stories.
When I opened up that office, I found that I was standing on about a 2-inch layer of paper. Most of it unopened mail, some of it opened mail. So my beginning several weeks, as I remember them, was really a process of picking up an item off the floor, examining it, trying to figure out what it meant and where it belonged, and very often calling the person who had sent that piece of mail and saying, "Hi, I'm the new executive director at Project SAFE, and I have just encountered this piece of mail," and really just sort of throwing myself at people's mercy.
My first day, I think I was mostly nervous. I was walking into an organization that had been in existence for a long time, but when I sat down at that desk, what was I going to physically do? I had no idea.
New executive directors in nonprofits often face unique challenges when leading organizational transitions from periods of hardship to times of growth. 3 prominent challenges include human resources, funding sources, and issues with effectiveness. Effectively managing these transitions further strengthens the impact of the nonprofit sector as a whole.
My name is Joan Pretty. I've been the executive director of Project SAFE for 17 years.
My name is Julie Mann, and I was the Executive Director of Community Connection from 2004 until 2013. When I came into the position was to go out and meet everybody I could meet, and everybody in a community leadership position, every organization that we worked with, the stakeholders that we worked with, to make sure that they knew that what we were doing and what we were doing was going to be done well and with integrity.
Building trust among community stakeholders was hugely important. Building the trust of staff, new staff that came on, and getting them to feel proud about working at Project SAFE and what we were doing, and to really sort of dream big about what we could accomplish.
Both Project SAFE and Community Connection initially faced significant personnel issues. Joan and Julie learned how to adjust their management style to improve their staff's efficiency, as well as finding cost-effective alternatives to continue operations and implement new programs.
The organization had gone through really a personnel situation that just spiraled out of control. Everyone in the organization either quit or was terminated in a very brief period of time. The organization closed down completely, ceased providing services. About a third of the board quit their service. When I came to Project SAFE, we just had 6 staff, including myself, for an organization whose hotline and shelter was open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The organization had relied on some volunteers to fill in some of those gaps, but we lost a number of those volunteers. And so our answer really was to try to cultivate student interns to come and work with us, knowing that interns would have more hours per week to commit to the service, but also would be with us at least a semester or a school year.
I would say that within nonprofits as a whole, nonprofits tend to turn over staff more quickly because they're not paid as well, the benefits aren't as great, and people are moving up constantly. Staff turnover is hard because you're always struggling to catch up. You're retraining, you're re-engaging, and so much of what 211 and all of our programs were about was knowing the resources in the community. So it's those unwritten and unpublished things that are so important to a successful service. We were able to overcome the staff turnover problem by increasing pay levels a little bit, but also by really engaging the staff in decision making and in improving their buy-in to the organization. We engaged tons of interns and were able to utilize resources in the community, volunteers and interns, to get the work done. I had a boss who lived by the motto, never let them see you sweat. And I can tell you that is not my style. I think that engaging your staff and letting them know what's going on and being totally transparent is one of the most important things you can do.
Limited resources and funding are perpetual concerns for most nonprofits. The demands of the nonprofit sector are also increasing, as government funding for social programs continues to decrease. As a result, nonprofits must be increasingly creative to attract funding from a variety of sources. In small organizations, executive directors and their board members are often tasked with this responsibility.
There was money in the bank. When I looked at the income and expenses, what there wasn't was sufficient income to try to drum up additional resources, and that was a slow process. It was this process of doing a lot of things concurrently, of trying to steer the board toward more fundraising and toward its own responsibility of donating money. And so that was a slow process over here. And then over here, trying to cultivate donors, trying to identify our supporters and steward those relationships further along, trying to create new relationships, and then to look for other sources of funds. Because our issue is so stigmatized and still something that people don't want to talk about and something that isn't talked about very much, we have to work harder, I think, to raise awareness in the community and to draw people in. And so over the years, we have focused on event fundraising as well, when we can combine the money raised through events with the community awareness and the cultivation of new supporters, then that really works well for us. And so we have 4 events that we sponsor annually and have for many years. Groovy Nights, Dancing with the Athens Stars, the Vagina Monologues, and the Jessica Nowell Stomp Out Domestic Violence. Groovy Nights began as a 70s themed disco party. The 70s were the birth of the violence against women movement and the birth of Project Safe as a voluntary organization. So it was fitting to pay tribute to that era, and just a lot of fun to play all of that 70s music and dress up in really tacky clothes and have a big dance party. Dancing with the Athens Stars is the big mother of fundraisers. We match popular, well-known people from different parts of the greater Athens community with volunteer dance instructors, and then they perform it on stage at the Classic Center. That just has raised an enormous amount of money for us. Last year it was over $150,000. It's been growing every single year, and it's just phenomenally popular, and it works on so many levels. It's a fun event to watch. The dancing is really quite good when you have that long to take private lessons. The other way that it works for us is that when we have people who are very accomplished, very well-known leaders in the community, in essence say, this issue is so important to me that I'm willing to sacrifice all of this time.
It's difficult to find funding for a lot of what Community Connection did because we weren't a direct service organization. We weren't out there saving babies from, living on the street. We weren't out there saving animals. We were connecting people to services that they needed, but we weren't necessarily delivering those services. Special events is where we had the most success. So we had a huge event called the Taste of Athens, and it would bring together about 2,000 community members who would come and have, taste the different restaurants of Athens. We'd have a silent auction, we'd have a raffle. And so that was one of our most successful events that allowed us to fund so much of what we did. I also was able to build on skills that that I had developed in grant writing. And even though we didn't receive a ton of money from grants, there were some local community foundations that funded us.
It is often difficult to accurately measure the effectiveness of nonprofit organizations. Engaging in performance measurement processes ensures that the services they deliver are efficient and effective, leading to informed decisions that create long-term sustainability. This is vital to fulfilling their mission and expanding their impact in the community.
There's a constant tension in nonprofit organizations, I think, between how much the executive director leads and how much the board leads. And toward the middle of my career, I think I wanted that control a little bit more. And the board at that time was tired from being over-involved, so they were ready to give me that extra little leniency. By the end of my tenure at Community Connection, I think I got it right, where we had a really good balance between board and executive director leading the organization and making decisions and being invested in the organization. We grew quite a bit while I was the executive director of Community Connection. We began with just the 211 function. 211 was that initial clearinghouse that the organization began with, where people could phone in, find information about organizations that they might be able to get help from. During my time as executive director, we started 2 additional programs. The first was called Hands On Northeast Georgia. And to the flip side of 211, it was a place for people who wanted to volunteer or to give help for organizations. We also started the Nonprofit Development Alliance, which built on one of the core functions of Community Connection. So the Nonprofit Development Alliance worked with nonprofit organizations to provide training, technical assistance, and capacity building services for nonprofits. Toward the end of my tenure at Community Connection, we engaged in the strategic planning process that the board was super engaged with. They participated in meetings with the community to find out what we were doing well and what we could improve on. They took that information, and together we crafted a strategic plan that looked at where the community needed us to go, what needs were being met, and what needs we should be meeting that we weren't meeting, and came up with a really good plan for the future.
I'm not the sort of leader that's comfortable making a lot of top-down pronouncements. I began to just have more and more unease with the kinds of rules that Project Safe had in the shelter. When I first came in, I'd never operated a shelter before, never been in one. I didn't know what was the norm and what wasn't. And the rules that Project Safe had in place in the shelter were actually the norm. So I just began a process through our regular staff meetings of, can we just go through these rules and kind of talk about them? Let's look at them and really see what we think about them and why they're here. We wound up chucking probably 3/4 of the rules that we had at the time. And the most important thing about it was that it wasn't me saying that we should do this. It was other people saying, yeah, we need to do this. This is great. And I was just like, super, that's wonderful.
I would say to myself 10 years ago, just to have confidence that to know that you can do it and that you can't do it alone, that it's going to involve the people around you, the board, the staff, the stakeholders of the organization are all there and they really want to support you. And as long as you have a vision and a confidence that you're going to get to the next stage, then those people will be with you and help you get there.
Probably I would say relax. That would be the main thing that I would tell myself. And certainly I would say it's all right not to know the answers and sometimes not to even quite know the direction, that it's all right to let things unfold. The other thing about sort of trying to promote change and transitions is to try to prepare for it before it's really necessary, to try to acclimate to the change before it's a big thing and a stressful thing.
Know that you're not alone. I think that nonprofit executive directors are in a weird position because they're the cheerleader for their staff and they're the cheerleader for their board, but nobody's the cheerleader for you. So you need to build your own support network in order to survive.
Like many strong executive directors, both Joan and Julie were able to lead successful transitions by overcoming challenges related to human resources, funding, and effectiveness in their respective nonprofits. The nonprofit sector will continue to thrive with effective leaders such as these, resulting in a greater impact in their communities.
I was pretty perfect. No, I'm just kidding. just kidding.